The emergency lights flashed red across the massive council chamber. Ambassador sat in the human delegation section, watching as the alien representatives gathered for what they called an urgent session. The chamber was enormous, built to hold delegates from 47 different species. Each race had their own section with special environments. Some needed water, others required different gravity, and a few breath gases that would kill most other beings. Had been Earth's voice in this council for 3 years now. She had learned to read the body language of creatures that had no bodies like humans. She knew when the insect-like were lying because their antennae would twitch. She understood that the floating changed colors based on their mood. Right now, she noticed that most delegates looked annoyed rather than concerned, despite the emergency alarm. The delegate stepped forward to the central platform. His species looked almost like Earth's bears, but they walked on 2 legs and had 6 arms instead of 4 limbs. His fur was matted, and his eyes showed clear signs of stress. Leaned forward, curious about what could shake a normally calm so badly. "Honored Council," the began, his voice translator making his words understandable to all species present. "I bring desperate news from Taros IV. Our colony world faces complete destruction. A solar anomaly has created massive radiation storms. Our shields are failing. We have 400,000 colonists, mostly civilians. They have less than 6 cycles before the radiation kills them all." The chamber erupted in chatter. Various delegates spoke to each other in their own languages, pulled up the data file on her tablet. Taros IV was a farming colony, one of the peaceful settlements that supplied food to several nearby systems. The images showed a beautiful world with green fields and blue oceans. Now, those same images updated to show angry red storms covering the planet's surface. The High Magistrate raised one of her many limbs for silence. "We have reviewed your request," she said in her clicking voice. "The Council must consider several factors. What resources would be required? What is the risk to rescue vessels? What is the strategic importance of this world?" Felt her stomach tighten. She had heard this tone before. It was the voice of someone preparing to say no. One by one, the Council races presented their reasons for not helping. They explained that their fleet was engaged in border patrols and could not be spared. The Commerce Guild calculated that the cost of rescue would exceed the economic value of the colony. The Military Protectorate stated that Taros IV held no strategic importance, making a rescue operation an inefficient use of military resources. The delegate's shoulders sagged with each rejection. His 6 arms hung limply at his sides. "Please," he said, and his voice cracked even through the translator. "These are families, children, the elderly. They did nothing wrong, they just need help." The final vote came quickly. 39 delegations voted against providing aid. 5 abstained. Only 2 voted in favor of themselves and the humans. The decision was final. The Council would not act. Watched the delegate leave the chamber, his heavy footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She gathered her things and walked quickly to her private communication room. Her fingers moved across the controls, opening a secure channel to the human fleet stationed nearby. Captain Jin's face appeared on the screen. He was young for a captain, only 35, but his eyes held the steady calm of someone who had seen combat and kept his crew alive through it. Behind him, could see the bridge of the Defiant Dawn, the flagship of the human patrol group in this sector. "Ambassador," Jin said, "I watched the council session. They said no." "To everyone," confirmed. "Captain, I can't order you to do anything. This isn't an official mission. But those people on Taros IV are going to die, and we're the only ones close enough to help." Jin turned to look at someone off-screen. Heard a woman's voice, Commander, the first officer. 6 days at maximum speed. We'd need to strip non-essential systems to make it in time." The captain nodded and looked back at, "How many ships do we have in the area?" 12 vessels total, said. 3 military escorts, 5 cargo freighters, 2 medical ships, and 2 science vessels. Not exactly a rescue fleet. It's what we have, Jin said, his jaw set in determination. Ambassador, I'm making the call. We're going to Taro's IV. Felt relief flood through her. The council won't authorize this. If something goes wrong, they won't send help. Then we better not let anything go wrong. Jin smiled slightly. Besides, since when do humans wait for permission to do the right thing? Within the hour, the human fleet began moving, watched from the council station as 12 ships broke formation and turned toward Taro's IV. Their engines burned bright as they accelerated to maximum speed. The other council delegates noticed immediately. The High Magistrate contacted, her antenna twitching with agitation. Ambassador, your ships are leaving their assigned patrol zone. This is a violation of fleet protocols. They're answering a distress call, replied calmly. Something about 400,000 people about to die. Perhaps you remember the discussion from earlier today. The council voted against intervention, the magistrate said sharply. Your species cannot simply ignore council decisions. Looked at the alien representative for a long moment. Magistrate, the council decided not to help. You made your choice. We're making ours. She closed the communication channel before the magistrate could respond. Her hands were shaking slightly as she stood and walked to the observation window. From here, she could see the stars and the distant trails of the human ships as they jumped to faster-than-light speed. Knew this would have consequences. The council would be angry. There would be political fallout. Some species would call the humans reckless or arrogant for acting without authorization. But right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was that 12 human ships were racing toward a dying world while the rest of the galaxy did nothing. She pulled out her personal communicator and sent a message to Earth's government. Unauthorized rescue operation. Request you prepare for political backlash. Also request you be proud of our people. The response came back within minutes. Already proud. Give them hell, Ambassador. Smiled. Sometimes being human meant making the hard choice. Sometimes it meant standing alone. And sometimes it meant stepping into the fire when everyone else stepped back. She just hoped her people would survive what came next. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Taro's IV system. Captain Jin stood on the bridge of the Defiant Dawn, staring at the main. What he saw made his blood run cold. The planet looked like it was dying. Massive red and orange storms covered almost the entire surface. Lightning arced between the clouds, so powerful that the flashes were visible from space. The radiation readings on his instruments climbed higher and higher, reaching levels that would kill most known species within hours. How bad is it? Jin asked his science officer. Worse than the reports suggested, Captain, the officer replied, her voice tight. The radiation levels have doubled since they sent their distress call. The electromagnetic interference is so strong that normal shields won't hold. We also have debris in orbit. Looks like 3 evacuation shuttles that got torn apart trying to leave. Commander stepped up beside Jin. She had been working without sleep for the entire 6-day journey, planning every detail of the rescue operation. If we send shuttles down through those storms with standard shields, we'll lose them just like they did. Jin nodded slowly. He had expected the mission to be difficult, but this was beyond anything they had trained for. Get me Engineer Wu. Maybe he has some ideas. Wu arrived on the bridge 10 minutes later. He was a short man with permanent grease stains on his hands and dark circles under his eyes from too many years of keeping old ships running. He studied the readings, his lips moving silently as he did calculations in his head. This is crazy, Wu finally said, but I think we can do it. We retrofit the cargo ship's industrial shields. Those shields are designed to protect against radiation from stellar manufacturing. We arrange the ships in a line, overlapping their shield coverage. It creates a corridor through the storm. Will it work? Asked. Wu shrugged. In theory, yes. In practice, we've never tried this before. The ships will need to maintain perfect formation. If one shield fails, the cascade effect could destroy the whole fleet, and even if it works, the shuttles will still be exposed to high radiation levels. Jin made his decision quickly. They had not come this far to turn back now. Make it happen. How long do you need? Give me 6 hours to retrofit the shields and set up the coordination systems. You have 4 hours, Jin said. Those people don't have time for us to be careful. While Wu and his engineering teams worked frantically to prepare the shield corridor, Dr. Sun Mi prepared the medical facilities. She was the chief medical officer for the fleet, responsible for keeping everyone alive. She knew human biology better than anyone, but she also knew their limits. Sun Mi converted 3 of the cargo bays into emergency medical wards. She ordered her staff to synthesize every anti-radiation compound they could make. The supplies would not be enough for a long operation, but it was all they had. She also prepared treatment stations for the refugees, studying their biology from the database to understand how radiation would affect their bodies. Doctor, one of her assistants said nervously, even with the anti-radiation drugs, our people on the surface will absorb dangerous levels of radiation. If we do multiple trips, some of them could die. Sun Mi looked at the young medic. Then we better work fast and keep everyone alive. Prepare the intensive care units. 4 hours later, Engineer Wu reported that the shield corridor was ready. The cargo freighters had moved into position, forming a line from orbit down toward the planet's surface. Their shields overlapped, creating a tunnel of protection through the deadly radiation storms. Lieutenant volunteered to pilot the first shuttle through the corridor. He was one of the best pilots in the fleet, with steady hands and nerves of steel. As he prepared for launch, other pilots gathered around him. "You don't have to do this," one of them said. "We can draw lots to see who goes first." Shook his head. "Someone has to test if this crazy idea works. I've been flying longer than most of you have been alive. If anyone can make it through, it's me." Jin spoke to over the communication channel. "Lieutenant, the moment your radiation readings go critical, you abort and come back. That's an order." "Understood, Captain," replied. But both men knew that if the corridor did not work, would not have time to abort. He would be dead before he could turn around. The shuttle launched from the Defiant Dawn and entered the shield corridor. Everyone on every ship watched their instruments, tracking progress. The radiation levels spiked immediately, then settled as the shields took effect. The readings climbed again when the shuttle hit a particularly strong storm cell, then dropped as adjusted his course. "He's through the worst of it," Commander reported. "Approaching the surface now." Shuttle landed near the primary colony shelter on Taro's IV. Through his, he could see a massive underground complex where the colonists had taken refuge. As his shuttle ramp lowered, he saw them, thousands of faces, looking up with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Defiant Dawn, this is," he said into his communicator. "I'm on the surface. The corridor works. Send everyone." The evacuation began in earnest. Marine Sergeant led his squad down to establish security and organize the evacuation. The Marines wore heavy armor that provided some radiation protection, but knew it would not be enough for extended surface time. "Listen up," told his squad. "We work in 30-minute shifts, no exceptions. I don't care how tough you think you are, when your time is up, you get back to the shuttle. Clear." The Marines nodded and spread out. They found organized chaos on the ground. They had been preparing to die, but now they had hope. Families clutched each other. Parents held children tight. The elderly moved slowly, weakened by days of fear and inadequate shelter. And his team moved through the crowds, helping people into orderly lines. They carried children who were too tired to walk. They supported elderly who could barely stand. Private Young spent valuable minutes searching for a lost pet when a child refused to leave without it. "We don't have time for this," another Marine said. "We make time," Young replied. crawling under debris until he found the small creature. The child's grateful smile made the radiation exposure worth it. Shuttle after shuttle made the journey through the corridor. Each one carried as many as could safely fit. The human crews worked with mechanical efficiency, loading people, launching, docking with the larger ships in orbit, and returning for another run. Hours passed. The radiation storms grew stronger. Engineer Wu constantly adjusted the shield corridor, compensating for the changing conditions. His teams made repairs as systems began to fail under the stress. Dr. Sun Mi's medical bays filled quickly. She treated radiation burns, exhaustion, dehydration, and panic attacks. She moved from patient to patient, her hands steady even as her mind calculated how many more people they could save before their supplies ran out. On the bridge, Jin watched the count climb. 50,000 evacuated, then 100,000, then 200,000, but it was not fast enough. The storms continued to intensify. Commander ran new calculations and showed them to Jin. The numbers were not good. At their current pace, they would leave behind more than 50,000 people. The shield corridor was already showing signs of stress. They had maybe another day before it collapsed completely. Jin stared at the numbers, his mind racing through options. They had come too far to leave anyone behind, but pushing harder meant risking his entire fleet. It meant potentially killing his own people to save strangers. He looked around his bridge at the crew who had followed him into this impossible situation. They were exhausted but determined. Not one of them had complained. Not one had suggested turning back. "Commander," Jin said quietly, "prep all ships for emergency protocols. We're going to finish this." 72 hours into the evacuation, the human fleet was running on determination and caffeine. Captain Jin had not slept more than a few hours since they arrived at Taro's IV. Neither had most of his crew. Every person on every ship pushed themselves beyond their normal limits because lives depended on it. Dr. Sun Mi walked through her converted cargo bay medical wards, checking on patients. The space was crowded with beds and medical equipment. Refugees lay recovering from radiation exposure and exhaustion. In the next section, human crew members received treatment for their own radiation sickness. Sun Mi had stopped counting how many doses of anti-radiation medication she had administered. She just kept moving, kept treating, kept people alive. A young human engineer named Bo lay on one of the beds, his skin showing the telltale burns of radiation exposure. He had been part of the team maintaining the shield corridor, working in the most dangerous areas where the radiation leaked through. "How are you feeling?" Sun Mi asked, checking his vital signs. "Like I got cooked from the inside," Bo said, managing a weak smile. "But I'll live, right, Doc?" Sun Mi injected him with another dose of medication. "You'll live, but you're staying here for at least 12 hours. No arguments." "What about the shields they need?" "Engineer Wu has other people on it. You've done your part, rest." Sun Mi moved to the next bed, then the next, treating burns and radiation sickness with practiced efficiency. Her medical supplies were running dangerously low. She had already started rationing, giving each patient just enough to keep them stable. If the evacuation went on much longer, she would have to make terrible choices about who got treatment and who did not. Down on the planet's surface, Marine Sergeant organized another group of refugees for evacuation. His squad had been rotating shifts for 3 days straight, each Marine spending 30 minutes on the surface before returning to the shuttle. But even 30 minutes in that radiation was taking its toll. Every member of his squad showed signs of exposure. The colony administrator, an old leader named Duren, approached during one of the loading operations. Duren had 6 arms like all, but his movements were slow with age. His fur had turned gray, and his eyes held the weight of seeing his people face extinction. "Sergeant," Duren said through his translator device, "why are you doing this? Your council said no. Your people owe us nothing. Why risk yourselves?" looked at the old. Around them, human Marines helped children onto the shuttle. One Marine carried an elderly on his back because she could not walk. Another Marine was sharing his water ration with a group of young refugees. "Because you needed help," said simply. "That's all the reason we need." Doran's eyes filled with tears. His species did not cry the way humans did, but the emotion was clear. "I will make sure the galaxy knows what humans did here. I will tell everyone." "Just get your people to safety," replied. "That's all the thanks we need." Back in orbit, Engineer Wu worked in the engineering bay of one of the cargo freighters. He had not left his post in over 40 hours. His hands shook from exhaustion as he made another adjustment to the shield systems. The numbers on his screens were all wrong. The shields were failing faster than he had predicted. His assistant, a young woman named, brought him another cup of coffee. "Sir, you need to rest. You're going to collapse." "I'll rest when this is over," Wu said, his eyes never leaving the screens. "Right now, those shields are the only thing keeping our shuttles alive down there." One of the cargo freighter's main generators chose that moment to fail. Alarms blared throughout the engineering bay. If they lost that generator, a section of the shield corridor would collapse. Any shuttles in that section would be exposed to full radiation. "How long to fix it?" Wu demanded. "Rand Diagnostics. The problem is in the reactor core. We'd need to shut down the shields to make repairs safely." "We can't shut down the shields. People are in transit." Wu stood up, grabbing a radiation suit. "I'm going in." "Sir, the radiation in the reactor room will be lethal, even with the suit." "Then I better work fast." Wu and a small team entered the reactor room wearing the heaviest radiation suits available. Even through the shielding, they could feel the heat and pressure. Their suits' radiation alarms screamed warnings at them. They had minutes, maybe less, before the exposure became fatal. Wu's hands moved with practiced precision, replacing burnt-out circuits and rerouting power. His suit's alarm became a constant shriek. Sweat poured down his face. Every second felt like an hour. But slowly, the generator's power output stabilized. The shields held. "Out, everyone out," Wu shouted. His team stumbled from the reactor room. As soon as they cleared the door, Wu collapsed. His radiation exposure was off the charts. His team rushed him to medical. Dr. Sun Mi looked at Wu's readings and felt her heart sink. He had absorbed enough radiation to kill 3 men. She immediately began aggressive treatment, pumping him full of every medication she had left. She would save him if she had to use her last supplies to do it. On the bridge of the Defiant Dawn, Commander brought Captain Jin the updated calculations. The news was not good. They had evacuated 287,000 colonists, but over 50,000 remained. The shield corridor would not hold much longer. They needed a new plan. Lieutenant, the shuttle pilot who had made the first run, suggested something radical. "Captain, what if we overload the shields? Channel every bit of power we have into one massive push. It would give us maybe 6 hours of stable corridor, enough time for a final evacuation run." "And after those 6 hours?" Jin asked. "The shields collapse completely. We'd be defenseless. Life support would be on emergency power, weapons offline. We'd be limping home on backup systems." Jin looked at the tactical display showing the positions of all 12 human ships. They were already damaged and worn down. This plan would leave them completely vulnerable. If anything went wrong, if they encountered hostiles, they would have no way to defend themselves. The Council had already made clear they would not send help. "Captain," said quietly, "we knew this mission might cost us everything. We came here to save those people, all of them." Jin thought about the easy path, evacuate who they could and leave. They had already saved hundreds of thousands. No one could criticize them for leaving the rest. It would be the logical choice, the safe choice. But humans did not always choose logic and safety. Sometimes they chose to finish what they started, no matter the cost. Prepare all ships for shield overload, Jin ordered. All non-essential systems offline. Every available shuttle prepped for final runs. We're bringing everyone home. Nodded and began issuing orders. Across the fleet, captains and crew members received the plan. They knew what it meant. They were putting everything on the line for one final push. There would be no safety margin, no backup plan. Success or disaster, nothing in between. The Galactic Council, monitoring the situation from their distant station, finally sent an official communication. The message appeared on Jin's screen, the High Magistrate's face filling the display. Captain Jin, this is reckless beyond measure. You are endangering your entire fleet. We order you to withdraw immediately. If your ships are lost, the Council will not authorize rescue operations. Jin looked at the alien official for a long moment. Then he smiled slightly. Magistrate, we stopped caring about your authorization 72 hours ago. Defiant dawn out. He closed the channel and turned to his crew. Let's finish this. The final evacuation run began with all 12 human ships channeling maximum power into the shield corridor. Throughout the fleet, lights dimmed as life support dropped to minimum levels. Weapons systems went completely offline. Even the gravity generators reduced to barely functional levels. Every spare watt of energy poured into the shields. Captain Jin watched his bridge displays as the shield's strength climbed higher than it had ever been. The corridor stabilized, glowing bright on the sensors. They had their window. Now they just had to use it before the whole system burned out. All shuttles launch, Jin ordered. Every bird we have goes down, maximum capacity on each run. 17 shuttles dropped from the human ships simultaneously, far more than had ever attempted the run at once. It was dangerous. The corridor was strong but not unlimited. Too many ships at once could create interference, but this was their last chance. Safety was a luxury they could not afford. Lieutenant led the shuttle formation down through the radiation storms. His hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, adjusting course to avoid the worst of the interference. Behind him, 16 other pilots matched his movements. They flew in tight formation, using each other's shields to provide extra protection. Stay close, said over the communication channel. If your readings go critical, don't be a hero. Get clear and let someone else finish your run. But everyone knew that no one would abort unless they were literally dying. They had come too far and sacrificed too much to leave anyone behind now. On the surface, Marine Sergeant coordinated the largest evacuation operation yet. His Marines spread out across 17 different pickup points, each team working with brutal efficiency. There was no time for anything but getting people onto shuttles as fast as possible. Private Young had been on the surface for 6 hours straight, far beyond the safe exposure limit. His radiation counter had stopped beeping warnings and just maintained a steady alarm tone. He knew he was absorbing lethal doses with every passing minute, but he kept working. There were still children who needed help, still families who needed to reach the shuttles. Young, you're done, said over the squad channel. Get to a shuttle now, that's an order. Just 5 more minutes, Sergeant, Young replied, carrying a child toward the nearest shuttle. There's still people here. Young. 5 minutes, then I'm gone, I promise. Wanted to argue, but there was no time. He had his own section to manage, his own people to save. He made a mental note to drag Young onto a shuttle personally if the kid did not evacuate soon. Aboard the Defiant Dawn, Dr. Sun Mi had converted the ship's dining hall into an emergency triage center. Her proper medical bays were full. Every bed had 2 or 3 patients. She worked with a skeleton crew, most of her staff already pushed to their limits. But still, they kept working, treating each new wave of refugees and crew members. Engineer Wu lay unconscious in one of the intensive care beds. His radiation exposure had been massive when he repaired the generator. Sun Mi had used the last of her strongest medications trying to save him. Now she could only monitor his vital signs and hope his body could fight through it. A young woman approached Sun Mi timidly. She held a small child, no more than 3 years old by aging standards. The child was limp in her arms, barely breathing. "Please," the woman said through her translator. "My daughter, she was in the storms, please help her." Sun Mi took the child and quickly assessed her condition. Severe radiation burns covered her small body. Her vital signs were failing. Sun Mi had seen these symptoms before. Without immediate treatment, the child had minutes to live. But Sun Mi's supplies were almost gone. She had maybe 3 doses of the critical medication left. Those doses needed to be saved for emergency cases. She looked at the dying child in her arms. This was an emergency case. "Prep intensive treatment bay 3, Sun Mi said to her assistant. "Full radiation protocol. Use whatever we have left." "Doctor, if we use it now, we won't have anything for. We'll worry about later when later comes. This child needs help now." Sun Mi worked for 20 minutes, using techniques and medications that would have made medical boards back on Earth question her license. She ignored protocols and took risks that no sane doctor would take. But slowly, the child's vital signs stabilized. Color returned to her skin, her breathing. The mother watched with tears streaming down her face. When Sun Mi finally handed the child back, now sleeping peacefully, the mother could barely speak through her sobs of gratitude. Down in the engineering section of the Defiant Dawn, the remaining engineering crew fought to keep the ship running. They had shut down everything that was not absolutely critical. The ship ran dark except for emergency lighting. The temperature had dropped to near freezing without the climate control systems, but the shields held. An engineer named watched his displays with growing concern. The shield generators were overheating. They had maybe 3 more hours before catastrophic failure, maybe less. He reported the numbers to the bridge. "Understood," Commander replied. "Give us every second you can." Looked at his small team, 5 people managing systems that normally required 20. They were cold, exhausted, and running on nothing but determination, but not one of them suggested giving up. "You heard the commander said, every second counts, let's keep this ship running." On the planet's surface, the evacuation entered its final phase. The last groups of colonists were being loaded onto shuttles. Marine Sergeant did a final sweep of the primary shelter, checking for anyone left behind. The underground complex was enormous, a maze of corridors and rooms. He split his remaining squad to cover more ground. In one of the far sections, found an elderly couple who had refused to leave earlier. They were too old to travel, they had said, and would only slow down the evacuation. Better to let the young ones go first. "You're coming with us," said firmly. "Everyone evacuates, no exceptions." "We will not make it," the old male said. "We are too weak, save your strength for those who can survive." Looked at the too old, they probably were right. The journey back would be hard on them. They might not survive it, but humans did not leave people behind just because it was hard. "I don't care if I have to carry you both myself," said. "You're leaving this planet." He called for help, and 2 of his Marines arrived. Together, they carefully carried the elderly couple through the corridors and onto the last shuttle. The couple protested weakly, but eventually gave in to the stubborn determination of the humans. Lieutenant piloted the final shuttle off the surface of Taros IV. Behind him, the empty shelters and abandoned buildings grew smaller. The radiation storms raged across the planet, turning it into a place where no one could ever live again. But there were no people left to die. The shelters were empty. They had gotten everyone. Defiant Dawn, this is, final shuttle clear. All colonists evacuated. Count is 412,000. We did it. On the bridge, Captain Jin allowed himself a moment of relief. They had actually done it. Against impossible odds with minimal resources, they had saved every single person on that planet. "Collapse the shield corridor," Jin ordered. "All ships prepare for withdrawal." The shield corridor flickered and died as the ships cut power to the overtaxed systems. Throughout the fleet, crews began the work of assessing damage and preparing for the long journey back to civilization. They were running on backup power, shields were down, weapons were offline. They limped through space like wounded animals. But they had saved 412,000 lives, not one person left behind. In medical, Dr. Sun Mi finally sat down for the first time in what felt like days. Her hands shook from exhaustion. Around her, patients filled every available space, but they were alive. Battered, burned, exhausted, but alive. Engineer Wu opened his eyes slowly. Sun Mi rushed to his side. "Did we make it?" Wu asked weakly. "We made it," Sun Mi confirmed. "Everyone's safe." Wu smiled and closed his eyes again, letting sleep take him. The human fleet set course for the nearest council station. Behind them, Taro's IV disappeared into the distance, a dead world now, but its people lived. That was all that mattered. The human fleet arrived at Council Station Sigma 7-8 days after leaving Taro's IV. They expected anger, criticism, and probably some form of punishment for disobeying council orders. What they found instead surprised everyone. 17 ships from different species waited in orbit around the station. As the damaged human fleet approached, these ships moved into escort formation, not as threats but as an honor guard. Their communication channels lit up with messages of respect and admiration. Captain Jin stood on his bridge, staring at the unexpected welcome. Commander checked the identifications of the waiting ships. There were vessels from species that had voted against helping Taro's IV. Some were military ships, others were merchant vessels, and a few were private yachts belonging to wealthy individuals. "Why are they here?" Jin asked. "Captain, you need to see this," pulled up the galactic news networks. Every major channel was covering the same story, the human rescue of Taro's IV. The refugees had been broadcasting their experiences across every available communication channel. Videos showed human marines carrying children through radiation storms. Images captured exhausted human crews working around the clock. Testimony from survivors described how humans had risked everything when no one else would help. Elder Duren, the old administrator, had given an interview that was being replayed across the galaxy. "The council told us we were not worth saving," Duren said, his 6 arms gesturing emphatically. "They calculated our value and found us lacking, but humans did not calculate. They did not debate. They just came. They suffered radiation poisoning. They exhausted their supplies. 3 of their people died keeping us alive. They are heroes." Jin felt his chest tighten at the mention of deaths. Engineer Na had died when her heart gave out after days of keeping the shields running. Pilot Jun had succumbed to radiation sickness despite Dr. Sun Mi's best efforts. Medic had collapsed while treating others and never regained consciousness. 3 good people who had given everything. Ambassador contacted the defiant Dawn from the council station. Her face on the screen showed a mixture of pride and concern. "Captain, I need to warn you. The council is in complete chaos. Protests have erupted on dozens of worlds. People are demanding to know why their governments refused to help while humans risked everything. Several council representatives face political collapse." "We didn't do this to embarrass them," Jin said. "We just wanted to save those people." "I know that. The galaxy knows that too. That's what makes this so powerful." The human fleet docked at Council Station Sigma 7. As the crews disembarked, they were met with something none of them expected: applause. Station workers from dozens of different species stopped their duties to clap, cheer, and show their respect. Refugees who had been brought to the station ahead of the fleet knelt in traditional gestures of gratitude as human crew members passed. Private Young, still recovering from his radiation exposure, walked slowly through the station corridors. A young child ran up to him, the same child whose pet he had rescued back on Taro's IV. The child's mother was with her, and she bowed deeply to Young. "You saved my daughter's toy," the mother said through her translator. Such a small thing, but it meant the world to her. It meant someone cared about more than just survival. Someone cared about a child's happiness even in the middle of disaster. Young felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," the mother said firmly. "You did what only humans did." Ambassador was summoned to address the full Galactic Council assembly. The chamber was packed with delegates, but also with media observers and representatives from dozens of species that did not normally attend council sessions. The entire galaxy seemed to be watching. The High Magistrate opened the session. Her antenna twitched nervously. "The Council must address the unauthorized actions of human vessels in the Taros IV incident. Ambassador, your ships violated direct Council orders and endangered." "Magistrate," a new voice interrupted. It was the delegate from the Military Protectorate, one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. "With respect, I think we should address why humans had to act at all. Why did this council sit and watch 400,000 people face death?" The chamber erupted into arguments. Delegates shouted at each other in dozens of languages. The magistrate called for order but was largely ignored. The council, which had maintained power through careful political calculations for centuries, was coming apart. Ambassador stood and waited. Eventually, the chamber quieted to hear what she would say. "We did not act to make you look bad," said calmly. "We acted because people needed help. We asked ourselves one simple question: can we help? The answer was yes, so we helped. If that embarrasses you, perhaps you should examine why." Captain Jin stood beside. He had not planned to speak, but seeing the council try to justify their inaction made his blood boil. "We lost 3 crew members," Jin said, his voice steady but firm. "Engineer Na died keeping the shields running. Pilot Jun succumbed to radiation sickness. Medic collapsed while treating others and never woke up. They gave their lives for people they had never met. Call that rash if you want. We call it human." The chamber fell silent. The weight of 3 lives lost hung heavy in the air. These were not abstract calculations or political theories. These were real people who had died doing what they believed was right. The response across the galaxy was immediate and powerful. Within hours, the formally petitioned to be placed under human protectorate status. They wanted humans, not the Council, to be responsible for their security and welfare. 6 other species made similar requests. Trade agreements flooded into human space. Everyone wanted to be allied with the species that had proven they would actually help when help was needed. The Council, facing the worst political crisis in its history, was forced to act. They passed what became known as the Human Relief Act, establishing formal protocols for humanitarian intervention. The protocols were written to match what humans had done instinctively: help first, calculate costs later, never leave people behind. Dr. Sun Mi visited the memorial wall that had been erected on the council station. 3 names were carved there: Na, Jun, and. They were the first recipients of the newly created Galactic Humanitarian Medal, an award that would become the highest honor for rescue and relief work. Sun Mi placed flowers at the base of the memorial, tears running down her face. "They would be proud," a voice said behind her. It was Engineer Wu, still recovering but insisting on attending the ceremony. "We all would have done the same if we had been in their position." "I know," Sun Mi said. "That's what makes it hurt so much. Any of us could have been them." Back aboard the Defiant Dawn, now in dry dock for extensive repairs, Commander supervised the restoration work. The ship had been damaged far beyond normal operational parameters. It would take months to fully repair. But the ship had done its job. It had brought everyone home. Lieutenant found in the cargo bay that had served as an emergency medical ward. The beds were gone now, replaced by repair equipment, but could still imagine the rows of patients, the exhausted medical staff, the controlled chaos of keeping people alive. "They're calling us heroes," said quietly. making monuments, writing songs, teaching our story in schools. Does it feel like being a hero? Asked. Shook his head. It just feels like we did what needed doing, nothing more complicated than that. Maybe that's what heroes are, suggested. People who do what needs doing when everyone else finds reasons not to. 10 cycles later, the impact of the Tarot's IV rescue had fundamentally changed galactic society. The Tarot's doctrine became standard teaching at human military academies. When others calculate, we act. When others debate, we move. When others abandon, we step into the fire. But the real change happened in the hearts and minds of billions of beings across the galaxy. Humans had proven that compassion was not weakness, that helping others did not require political advantage, that sometimes the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do. Captain Jin received promotion offers from half a dozen different human fleets. He turned them all down and requested to be reassigned to humanitarian relief operations. Someone has to keep doing this work, he explained. Might as well be people who know how. Ambassador continued to serve on the Galactic Council, but now she did so with far more influence. When humans spoke, other species listened. When humans made suggestions, governments considered them carefully. The species that had once been dismissed as emotional and illogical was now recognized as having wisdom that cold calculations could never match. The refugees settled on a new world, one provided through the human protectorate. They named their new capital city Defiant, after the ship that had led their rescue. In the city center stood a monument showing 3 figures, Na, Jun, and beneath their names was a simple inscription: "They stepped into the fire so we could live." Throughout the galaxy, whenever disasters struck and governments hesitated, there was a new saying among those in desperate need: "Call the humans, they'll come." And they always did. Because that was what humans did. When the council abandoned people, humans stepped into the fire, not for glory, not for profit, but because someone needed help and they could provide it. That was reason enough. That had always been reason enough. And it always would be.